Ever had your internet go out? Like, completely. It's kind of a weird feeling, right? Certainly cut off. But what if that happened to a whole country? That's what's got us digging in today. Russia and their, well, internet disconnection tests.
Yeah. See, and what's interesting is this isn't even their first go at it. Back in 2019, they did similar stuff. But this time, just this past weekend, December 6th and 7th, they focused on a few regions: Dagestan, Chechnya, and Ingushetia.
And I was reading, it wasn't just a little outage either, right? Like people couldn't get to websites outside Russia. Apps like WhatsApp, even Telegram went down, and even some sites inside Russia were a no-go. And you said those regions they picked, that's worth noting too.
Oh, definitely. That's something we'll circle back to. But first, got to lay out the basics. Russia's saying this is all cybersecurity, making sure their internet can handle an attack. But naturally, some folks see it differently. More control, maybe even getting ready to take Russia offline completely, what with the war in Ukraine and all.
So prepping for war by going offline doesn't quite compute in our world where everything's got to be connected. But Russia does seem pretty serious about this sovereign internet thing.
For sure, this has been in the works for a while now. Imagine them trying to make, like, a giant intranet just for Russia, filtering everything going in or out. Kind of like, when you're on a company's network, you can get to some stuff, but not the whole internet.
That's a huge project though, right?
Yeah.
Technologically, I mean. And wouldn't you need everyone on board, like the companies that provide internet, the whole system?
Yeah, they'd have to get involved with undersea cables, those giant lines carrying data across the ocean floor,
Yeah.
regulating them, maybe even blocking them to control what goes in and out. And you're right, you'd need those ISPs, internet providers, especially the ones run by the government, to play along too.
Then there's the whole building the alternative, this RuNet they talk about. Sounds almost like trying to invent another internet from scratch.
Yeah.
Ambitious, for sure. They could be looking at what China's done with their Great Firewall, or Iran's system where they've got online stuff, but it's tightly controlled. They've already got their own versions of some big sites, Yandex instead of Google, that sort of thing.
So let's say they actually do this. Russia goes offline, builds this RuNet fortress. What happens then? I mean, for regular people, what's the impact?
Think about it. No more news from outside Russia. Can't talk to your family in another country, at least not easily. You're stuck with whatever the government wants you to see. That's some serious questions about, freedom of information, what people are allowed to say and think.
And economically, doesn't Russia already have enough trouble with sanctions and all? Wouldn't this just make things worse? Like cutting them off from global trade.
Oh, absolutely. Any business that relies on, international communication, transferring data, all that's online now. They'd be in a tough spot. Some say it might help the Russian tech companies like those Yandex and Mail.ru outfits, but overall, economically, it'd be massive.
And strategically, is this really about getting ready for war? Like they think they'll be hit with cyber attacks, so they want to disconnect first.
Tough to say for sure. But it's interesting this happens right after a big cyber attack from a Western country, right? Some experts think maybe Russia sees this isolation as a way to, manage what information gets out during a conflict, stop panic, keep people from protesting, make themselves less of a target.
But wouldn't that also make it harder for them to, gather intelligence, do stuff internationally? It's got to cut both ways, right?
You got a point there. There's trade-offs to this kind of isolation, definitely something to explore more.
And what about those regions they picked for these tests? You said that stood out.
Right, Dagestan, Chechnya, and Ingushetia, they've had unrest there politically, and they're mostly Muslim. So maybe this is about trying out control in areas the government sees as sensitive.
So not just prepping for some big war, but a way to keep things in line inside the country too. Adds a whole other layer to this sovereign internet idea.
For sure. It's saying this isn't just about enemies outside, but about control within, too.
All right, so we got this picture forming. Russia maybe trying to wall themselves off online, huge consequences for information, their economy, maybe even how stable those specific regions stay. But can they even do it? I mean, is this technically possible?
The million-dollar question, and one we'll tackle next. We got to get into the nitty-gritty, how a country as big and wired up as Russia could even attempt this. Okay, so picture the internet like a giant highway system, right? Data's the traffic, zipping between countries. If Russia wants to go totally solo, got to control where that traffic gets in and out.
Okay, I'm seeing it. So where are the toll booths, the checkpoints? Where they set up their digital border patrol?
One big one is undersea cables, those massive fiber optic lines way down on the ocean floor. That's how most data travels around the world. They have to physically cut them off or filter like crazy. All the data coming through those cables connecting Russia to, well, everywhere else.
That's dot bold. Wouldn't that mess up global communication, even like financial markets? What about legally? Can they just do that?
Oh, yeah. Other countries wouldn't be happy. Cutting those cables, it disrupts stuff for everyone. Global internet traffic, not just a Russia problem.
And even practically, how do you get to those things? They're deep underwater international waters, right?
Yeah, not easy, that's for sure. You'd need the right equipment, the know-how. Could cause things to heat up with other countries big time. But yeah, it could be done.
So let's say they figure out the cable situation. What else?
There's these things called Internet Exchange Points, IXPs. Basically, think of it like huge data intersections, where all the different internet providers, they swap traffic. Russia would have to control those IXPs inside their borders to stop data getting out.
So control the central hubs where all the internet stuff comes together.
Exactly. And here's where it gets tricky. Some of those IXPs, they're shared with neighboring countries. Russia can't just shut them down without messing things up for their neighbors too.
And even if they control the cables, the IXPs, what about people who know their way around the internet? VPNs, proxy servers, that kind of stuff.
Always going to be that back and forth, right? People building walls, people finding ways over, under, around them.
So even if Russia pulls up the digital drawbridge, folks could still sneak out.
You bet. People are clever, and the tools already exist to get around this kind of censorship.
But Russia's been going after VPNs lately, haven't they? New rules and all that.
True, they're trying to limit VPN use, but it's like, trying to plug every hole in a leaky boat. New ones keep popping up.
Right, right. So the physical stuff, that's one battle. But what about the actual websites, the stuff people use online? Would they have to, like, invent their own versions of everything?
That's the flip side of this whole sovereign internet thing, right? Not just blocking stuff, but building their own. We talked about Yandex for search, Mail.ru for email. They've got a head start there.
But think about all the other stuff. Social media, games, online banking, shopping. That's a lot to try and copy.
Massive undertaking, no question. Would take tons of money. And who knows if they could actually make something good enough that people would use it.
Quality's a big thing, right? Sometimes those homegrown alternatives, well, they just don't cut it.
Totally. People worry about that. Innovation, will the quality be there? If you've got no competition, maybe don't try as hard, right?
Oh. Even if they build this fortress, it might end up being kind of empty. Not exactly what you want to offer your citizens.
It's possible, yeah. And that makes you wonder, how would people react? Would they just go along with this new internet where you can only access certain things?
Weren't there protests already over some of this internet control stuff? People like their online freedom, right?
Oh, for sure. And the more they tighten the screws, the more pushback you're going to get. It could be a real test for the government, how much they can control.
So technically, it's a mess.
Yeah.
Maybe not impossible, but a big challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's whether people even accept it. But let's zoom back out to the strategy side of things. Even if they can do all this, is it a smart move for Russia?
Now there's the key question. And to figure that out, we got to look at what Russia might gain from this and what they'd be risking.
Well, what's the goal here? Why go offline?
One argument you hear is protection from those cyber attacks. If they're not on the regular internet, they're a harder target to hit.
Like unplugging your computer to avoid a virus.
Kind of, yeah. Make yourself less vulnerable to those outside threats.
But wouldn't it also make it harder for them to, hit back if they get attacked?
That's the trade-off for sure. It's all about defense, putting up the shields, maybe at the cost of being able to strike back as easily.
And what about the whole, information war angle? Controlling what people see, stopping anyone who disagrees. How much of this is about that, shaping what people think?
Definitely a thruster. When there's conflict, information's a weapon, right? Controlling that flow can help keep people calm, stop opposition, make sure everyone supports what's going on.
But if the information's only going one way, won't that make people even more suspicious of what they're being told?
That's the risk, for sure. If people feel like they're being manipulated, it can blow up in your face. Leads to even less trust.
Okay, so some potential good stuff for Russia, but big risks too. And the economy? Can they even afford to do this, cut themselves off like that?
Huge concern. We talked about that earlier. The economic hit could be rough, probably makes their current problems worse. And long-term, who knows what it does to innovation and growth.
So are they really willing to pay that price?
It's a gamble, big time. And it feels like they're still trying to figure out, is it worth it? What are the costs? What are the benefits?
What about the rest of the world? How would other countries react to this Russia just going off on their own digitally?
People would notice for sure. It'd probably be seen as a hostile move, isolating themselves even more, going against global cooperation. Might even make other countries take action in response.
So it's not just the tech stuff, the money risks, even what people inside Russia will do.
Hmm.
This is a decision with, like, global consequences.
100%. It's a move that would shake things up everywhere, change the whole digital landscape, and who knows, maybe make things even more tense between countries.
Sounds risky.
Yeah.
Like way more downsides than upsides.
It's high stakes, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And only time will tell if Russia's really ready to take that gamble.
All right, so we've looked at the how, the why, the good, the bad, all from Russia's point of view. But let's zoom out for a sec. What does this whole sovereign internet push, what does it mean for the rest of us? For the internet, period.
Man, it raises some big questions. If a country like Russia, big as it is online as much as they are, if they can pull this off, what happens to the idea of, one global internet? Are we headed for something more broken up?
That's the splinternet, right? The word people are using. Like
Mhm.
instead of one big internet, we get these little walled off ones, country by country.
Exactly. And it's not just Russia. China's been doing their thing with the Great Firewall for ages, and other places are getting stricter too, filtering what people see online, trying to take more control.
But isn't the whole point of the internet that it's global? That it doesn't care about borders?
Yeah.
That's what made it so, revolutionary in the first place.
It was, yeah. And in a lot of ways, it still is. But governments, they're getting more and more worried about the power the internet has. They want to control the information, protect people from stuff they don't like, make sure their own interests are safe.
So it's this battle, right? The dream of the internet, no borders, versus, well, how messy things actually are between countries.
100%. And that battle's probably going to get even more intense. Think about it. The internet's more important every day for our lives, how the economy works, even politics. So, yeah, it's prime real estate for anyone who wants to be in charge.
So, okay, let's play this out. Worst case, splinternet happens.
Hmm.
What does that even look like? How would it change how we live, work, connect to each other?
Well, day to day could be a real pain. Imagine you travel to a country where the internet's locked down. You can't get to your social media, the news you usually read, maybe even your bank.
And what about companies that do business all over? Wouldn't that be a nightmare for them?
Totally. International business, working together, just talking to people. Way more complicated. You got to deal with a million different rules just to send an email.
And wouldn't it make it harder to fix the problems that affect everyone?
Yeah.
Climate change, pandemics, that stuff needs countries to work together.
You got it. A broken up internet, it's harder to share what's going on, coordinate, get everyone on the same page.
And culturally, right. The internet's been amazing for sharing ideas, art, music, all that. Wouldn't we lose some of that connection between different cultures?
We would, yeah. A splintered internet, you're kind of stuck in your own little bubble. Everyone loses out on something then.
So it's not just like, oh, it'll be annoying or cost some businesses money. It's about losing some of what makes the internet good, how it connects people, how it helps us move forward.
Exactly. And that's something worth thinking about, seriously.
Can we even do anything about this? Is there a way to, push back against this whole fragmentation thing?
Not easy, that's for sure. But there are things. Supporting those groups out there fighting for a free and open internet, that's important. And telling our own governments, hey, we want policies that make the internet more open, not less.
And just in our own lives, right? Choosing companies like VPNs that care about privacy, thinking about what websites we use, speaking up when we see censorship happening.
Every little bit helps. In the end, it's the choices we make, each of us and all of us together. What kind of internet do we want? One that divides us, controls us, or one that connects us, helps us make progress?
Big question, right? And one we got to think about. Because how the internet goes, that shapes a lot of how the world goes, doesn't it?
Can't just sit back and watch. Not on this. The internet matters too much.
So to everyone listening, that's our takeaway. Stay informed, stay involved, keep fighting for a better internet for everyone.
That's what'll decide the future, the digital world and the real one.